Sri Dharma Pravartaka Acharya is a spiritual master in the ancient tradition of Sanatana Dharma, a Vedic philosopher, and a Hindu religious leader. He is widely renowned for his unapologetically authentic, traditional, and fearless approach to the teaching the spiritual truth of the Vedic tradition. Whether speaking to an audience of thousands or having a heartfelt discussion with one person, Sri Acharyaji vividly conveys a deeply moving sense of personal compassion, peace, humility, integrity, and spiritual insight that has endeared him to thousands of students and admirers throughout the world. He is the real thing, an enlightened and exceedingly qualified spiritual master. Sri Acharyaji was born in New York City. He is a European American of Italian and Spanish descent. Sri Acharyaji has been studying and practicing the ancient tradition of Sanatana Dharma and yoga spirituality intensely for over 38 years. The dedicated pursuit of self-realization and for a direct experience of God began for him at a very early age. He chose to follow the path of Sanatana Dharma specifically when he first read the Bhagavad Gita, the most important philosophical scripture of the Sanatana Dharma tradition, at the tender age of 10. As a philosophically inquisitive and deeply contemplative child, Acharyaji then began collecting and studying a vast number of books relating to Dharma, spirituality, Vedanta, Vedic civilization, meditation, and yoga.
मुलाकात करवा दें। हमारे जो अगले मेहमान हैं, इन्होंने 10 साल की उम्र में पहली बार भागवत गीता का अध्ययन किया, पढ़ा, और वो उनसे इतने प्रभावित हुए कि उनकी इच्छा हुई कि वो हिंदू टेंपल, हिंदू मंदिर जाकर भगवान के दर्शन करें। और 14 साल की उम्र में उन्होंने बॉनी स्ट्रीट कसीना, जो फ्लशिंग में हिंदू टेंपल है, वहाँ प्रभु के दर्शन किए। जी हाँ, फ्रॉम द स्ट्रीट्स ऑफ ब्रुकलिन टू द फीट ऑफ गॉड इज़ आवर नेक्स्ट गेस्ट, का जो हिंदू नाम है वो श्री धर्मा प्रवर्तका आचार्य है। As a non-Indian American, how did you end up becoming an authority on Vedic culture? I mean, what brought you here? Just reading the Bhagavad Gita?
Well, it was a very long route, actually. That was certainly the beginning of it. As a much younger person, actually, I was very interested in religion. I had studied many of the religions of the world, Christianity, Islam. I had read Old and New Testament, the Quran, many Buddhist works. But yes, it was the Bhagavad Gita, especially, that impressed me.
Why Hinduism? Why did you choose Hinduism?
Well, again, having read all of these other works, I found the Bhagavad Gita to be something categorically different in what it was saying, in the message that it was trying to convey.
For example?
Well, the issues that were being discussed by Krishna and Arjuna were of an overtly philosophical nature, as opposed to dogmatic or theological. So everything that was being discussed in the Bhagavad Gita were questions and answers that had universal implications. Such questions as, who am I? What is the nature of self? What is the nature of this reality that I find myself situated in? What is the nature of God? Is there a God? And then knowing all this, finally, what am I to do? So very practically speaking, what am I to do? I found it fascinating that unlike any of the other religious scriptures, first of all, this was a dialogue. It was not a monologue. It was not simply a concept of God dictating to human beings what they should and should not do. But it was actually a dialogue between God and his devotee, Arjuna. So that was very impressive. And then, again, the questions that were being asked, as well as the answers, were answers that pertain to all of humanity, irregardless of their culture, of their religion or lack thereof. And that's what I found very appealing about the Bhagavad Gita. And then as I went on to study other scriptures, Mahabharata, Ramayana, etc., again, I found the universality of this tradition of Sanatana Dharma to be something that was very appealing to me personally. But more than that, I saw it as something that was incredibly relevant to today's world.
He also proceeded to intensely practice various forms of yoga, pranayama, breathing exercises, and meditation soon after the first encounter with the Bhagavad Gita. At the young age of 14, Sri Acharyaji formally visited a Hindu temple for the first time. This was the famous Ganapati temple in Flushing, Queens, the very first Hindu temple built in North America. So awed was he with the majestic beauty and spiritual power that he encountered in this historic temple that, on the spot, he surrendered his life at the feet of Sriman Narayana, God, and decided to devote every fragment of his life to the path of Vedic spirituality.
And I just want to share with my viewers that it was somewhere in New York itself that you went to a temple and then seeing the forms of the deities, you felt something special, which has kind of changed the course of your life in a very significant way. I would request you to go back with us to that particular temple and whatever happened in your mind being there.
All right, well, it certainly was some time ago. Presently, I'm 43 years old, so we're talking about approximately 3 decades ago. I was about 14 years old at the time when I visited my first Hindu temple, and that was in Queens, New York, actually very close to here. It was the Ganapati Temple on Bound Street. And previous to that, I had been studying Hinduism. Even as a child, I had read the Bhagavad Gita. But this was my very first time actually visiting a temple. And I remember as a child, it was an interesting experience. Living in Brooklyn, I remember it was a very long distance to get there. I had to take the train from Brooklyn into Manhattan, into Queens. And then when I got off, to my dismay, I realized I then had to walk about half a mile. But what was interesting is, as I was doing this walking, I would pass house after house, and everything seemed fine. Everything just seemed familiar to me, you know, normal house after normal house. And then suddenly, there on my left was India. There was this beautiful, magnificently carved temple. And I was astounded just at how beautiful it was. But then I walked into the temple. And when I walked into the temple, I had this truly significant experience. First, just even walking into the door, I quite literally felt as if I was leaving behind the world I had known, and I was now entering into a spiritual realm. And this, again, being my very first time at a temple, my senses were assaulted, but nicely, wonderfully assaulted. I was smelling the incense, you know. I was hearing the priests as they were reciting these beautiful Sanskrit mantras. As I looked all around me, I was seeing these beautiful images of the devas and the devis. So literally my senses were overwhelmed. And after drinking it in for some time, I finally had this fascinating experience. It was a powerful experience. I felt as if I was home. And you know, it's interesting. For many Westerners, when they enter a Hindu temple for the first time, they can feel very overwhelmed because the culture is very, very different. For me, it was a very pleasant form of being overwhelmed. I literally felt as if I was home. And that very day, I remember I went to a smaller place where they had Venkateshwara off to the side. And I remember sitting there and just meditating for some time. And in my mind, surrendering myself and saying to myself, this is not my religion. And it will be for the rest of my life. And I was 14 at the time. And again, I'm 43. still practicing Sanatana Dharma to this day.
It was at this time that he was first initiated into the Vedic mantra Om Namo Narayanaya. Soon after this transformative experience, Sri Acharyaji lived the life of a highly disciplined celibate Hindu monk for 6 years in several ashrams throughout New York, as well as in the Bay Area, London, and India. Sri Acharyaji was formally ordained in India as an orthodox Vedic Brahmana, a spiritual teacher and a Vedic priest, in 1986 by his guru, the world-famous Vaishnava Acharya Bhakti Rakshaka Sridhar Swami. His full Sanskrit name is Sri Dharma Pravartaka Acharya. Dharma Pravartaka means he who sets dharma in motion. He is known today to his many students and followers affectionately as Sri Acharyaji. Sri Acharyaji has been working tirelessly to set dharma in motion for all his adult life. He began formally teaching Sanatana Dharma, yoga spirituality, and meditation in Chicago in 1988, and presently teaches the most authentic and spiritually compelling form of Sanatana Dharma and classical yoga spirituality available anywhere in the world today. In addition to being an accomplished spiritual practitioner and a globally recognized Hindu guru, Sri Acharyaji coupled his personal spiritual practice with a formal regimen of rigorous academic training. Sri Acharyaji earned a Bachelor's of Arts degree in Philosophy and Theology, magna cum laude, from Loyola University, Chicago in 1994. While there, he studied the theological, intellectual, and philosophical foundations of Western civilization, as well as medieval scholastic method of philosophical disputation under the brilliant tutelage of Jesuit and Order of Catholic priest professors. While at Loyola, Sri Acharyaji was inducted into 5 national academic honor societies. In May of 1999, Sri Acharyaji earned a Master of Arts degree in South Asian Languages and Literature. In December of 2002, Sri Acharyaji earned a PhD, summa cum laude, in Languages and Cultures of Asia at the University of Wisconsin-Madison with a focus on religious studies and philosophy of religion. His entire academic career, from start to finish, was financially secured by a variety of academically awarded scholarships and fellowships that recognize his academic genius. As a scholar, Sri Acharyaji specialized in philosophy of religion, Sanskrit, Vedic studies, and South Asian studies. He has written for numerous academic journals, magazines, anthologies, as well as presented talks at many formal academic conferences, including the American Academy of Religion, AAR. Sri Acharyaji has guest lectured at dozens of major universities, including such prestigious institutions as Harvard, Columbia, Rutgers, Cornell, Northwestern, and the University of Virginia.
Concepts. Hinduism, in all of its many facets, is exploding. It is becoming incredibly popular, not only in India, but outside of India. In fact, in some nations, it's much more popular outside of India than it is in India. So what we're experiencing is a resurgence, a renaissance, a revival of Sanatana Dharma in India and throughout the world. And what this resurgence of Sanatana Dharma is going to usher in our immediate future, in our lifetimes, is a world that is a little bit more peaceful, a world that has a little bit more justice, a world that has a little bit more tolerance. Because those are the foundations of Sanatana Dharma. If you are a human being, simply, if you are a human being, if you have that one and only qualification, at some point in your mind, in your lifetime, having a rational mind, having the ability to think discursively at one point or another in your lifetime, you will think of these questions, and questions similar to them. Who am I? Who am I really? Not who am I simply as this person I see in the mirror every single morning as I'm brushing my teeth. Not simply who am I, meaning what my parents have told me I am. Not merely who am I, meaning I can take my idea out of my pocket and say, well, I'm this person. But who are we truly and really when we strip away all those things on the peripheries of our existence that we identify with so closely, but in actuality are not essential to who and what we truly are? So that's what I mean by that very simple question. Who are we? That's a philosophical question. What is the nature of this reality that I find around me, that I find myself situated in? Why is it that there is a me and there is a that? What does it mean? What does it mean? What is the nature of the absolute if there is indeed an absolute? And all that being said, what is the relationship and the interrelationship between all these different aspects of reality? These are questions which, if you are human, at one point or another, they will arise in your mind. It might be just for a few minutes, here and there. It might be for a few hours. It might be for longer. It might get to the point where you actually try to find the answers. We actually will pick up some books, some philosophical books. For some of us, it becomes a lifelong obsession. And we must know the answers to these questions. We know that it is our soul, our Atman, that animates the body, that gives the body its raison d'être, its reason for being. Without the soul, if the soul is not present, the body is meaningless.
He has also served as a religious consultant for many Fortune 500 corporations, including Ford Motor Company, Global Health Corporation, and Lucent Technology. In early 2002, just a few short months after the 9/11 terrorist attacks, for example, Sri Acharyaji was commissioned by Ford Motor Company to address over 1,000 of its employees as the representative of the Hindu religion at a company-organized interfaith conference. Explaining very early on at his first meeting with his doctoral advisor in 1995 that,
I don't want to just study the history of religion. My ultimate aim is to make religious history.
Sri Acharyaji eventually left academia to devote himself exclusively to spiritual teachings and to the preservation of the great tradition of Sanatana Dharma.
चले एक रास्ते पे हमसे भूल गए।
Sri Acharyaji is currently recognized as one of the world's foremost scholars of the Vedic religion, the yoga tradition, dharma, and meditation, as well as being one of the precious few truly authentic and enlightened gurus, spiritual teachers, fully capable of leading his sincere disciples to enlightenment. Sri Acharyaji is one of the very few non-Indian spiritual teachers on earth today to be fully accepted by both the Orthodox Indian Hindu community, in addition to the large community of Western spiritual seekers, as being a fully authentic and recognized spiritual teacher, Acharya.
आपका नाम क्या है? Very good. Very nice. Welcome. Namaskaram. मेरा नाम धर्म प्रवर्तक आचार्य है। मैं भारतीय नहीं हूँ, लेकिन मैं हिंदू हूँ।
He is the president and Acharya of the International Sanatana Dharma Society, a worldwide movement dedicated to teaching Dharma spirituality. Sri Acharyaji's many students and supporters come from both Indian and non-Indian communities, and the number in multiple thousands. The form of Dharma spirituality that Sri Acharyaji both practices and teaches is the most ancient, traditional, and effective of all Dharma traditions. Sri Acharyaji's depth of knowledge about the yoga tradition, his authentic and personal approach to teaching others, and his own exalted level of personal achievement in meditation and self-realization have become legendary in the yoga and Hindu communities throughout the world. Sri Acharyaji's teachings stress the achievement of self-realization, Atma-jnana, and God consciousness, Brahma Vidya, through the practice of devotional meditation, bhakti, yoga, and directly experiencing the presence of the divine. Another overarching aspect of Sri Acharyaji's teachings focuses on the importance of spiritual love, meaningful compassion, and service towards all living beings. Sri Acharyaji teaches the ancient philosophy of Sanatana Dharma in a way that is both understandable and inviting to the modern mind. Sri Acharyaji has delivered many hundreds of lectures, satsangs, and seminars throughout North America, as well as written countless published articles on many key aspects of yoga philosophy and Dharma spirituality. In addition, he has been the keynote speaker at several very large national Hindu events, each with audiences in the multiple thousands. In June 2007, as an example, Sri Acharyaji was the keynote speaker at the largest single gathering of Hindus in American history. During the Swaday event in Washington, D.C., Sri Acharyaji spoke to an estimated 20,000 Hindus about the benefit of Dharma spirituality. Sri Acharyaji was formally appointed as the resident Acharya, spiritual preceptor of the Hindu Temple of Nebraska, 2007 to 2009, which represents the first time in American history that a Hindu temple had ever made such an esteemed appointment. His PhD dissertation, the 408-page The Vedic Way of Knowing God, was published in the book form for the public November 2010 with laudatory forewords by Professor Klaus Klaustermeier and Dr. David Frowley. His thus far released books include The Vedic Way of Knowing God, Sanatana Dharma, The Eternal Natural Way, The Sakti Principle, Encountering the Feminine Power of God, The Art of Wisdom, Affirmation for Boundless Living, Radical Universalism, Are All Religions the Same? Living Dharma, The Teachings of Sri Dharma Pravartaka Acharya, Taking Refuge in Dharma, The Initiation Guidebook. His most recent book is destined to be his most groundbreaking and revolutionary work yet, the 410-page work Sanatana Dharma, The Eternal Natural Way, which was published in August 2011. An all-in-one guide to the world of yoga, Vedanta, meditation, and Hinduism, this book is a celebration of the tradition of Sanatana Dharma. This magnum opus work is a comprehensive summary of this profound spiritual tradition. It is the first English-language systematic theological compendium, Summa Theologica, and philosophical exposition of the entire worldview of Sanatana Dharma ever produced.
It's not meant for academicians. It's meant for anyone, who has some modicum of intelligence, some philosophical understanding. You do have to be an intelligent person to understand it, but you don't have to be a scholar. Not like my last book, The Vedic Way of Knowing God. You don't have to have a PhD to understand it. This is a book meant for anyone who is sincere, anyone who just wants to know what is Sanatana Dharma. But more than that, it is indeed a revolutionary manifesto meant to change the face of the earth. And by God's grace, that's what it will do.
Sri Acharyaji is recognized by many contemporary Hindu leaders as being the most innovative, forward-thinking, dynamic, and brilliant spiritual leader in the world Hindu community today, instigating many groundbreaking projects designed to preserve Vedic spirituality in its most pristine form, to strengthen and to expand the world's understanding of the philosophy and culture of Sanatana Dharma, and to teach the life-enhancing yogic techniques of the Vedic tradition to all sincere spiritual seekers. Beginning in the late 1980s, for example, Sri Acharyaji began a single-handed campaign to encourage the gradual abandoning of such incorrect terms as Hinduism and Hindu, and to encourage instead the more proper use of the respective terms Sanatana Dharma and Dharmi. As Sri Acharyaji explains the issue in his book Sanatana Dharma, The Eternal Natural Way.
The word Hinduism is not found anywhere in either Vedic or classical Sanskrit, nor in any of the recognized sacred scriptures or shastras of this spiritual path. Rather, the proper name of this spiritual tradition, the name that is found throughout the scriptures of the tradition, is Sanatana Dharma, or the Eternal Natural Way. Additionally, followers of Sanatana Dharma are not properly referred to as Hindus, but as Dharmis, or followers of Sanatana Dharma.
At the time that Sri Acharyaji began this campaign, he was one of the very few Hindu leaders even using the term Sanatana Dharma. Almost every other leader of the tradition was still using the incorrect term Hinduism. Indeed, he was initially greeted with a degree of opposition and pushback from many less knowledgeable Hindu leaders when he first began this important campaign. The situation today, of course, has now dramatically changed. As of 2012, over 2 decades after Sri Acharyaji began this concerted campaign as a lone voice in the wilderness, multiple millions of followers of Vedic Way have now begun to use Sri Acharyaji's preferred terms Sanatana Dharma and Dharmi.
I am maybe, this makes me sad to even think about it. I have to actually examine my memory. But I think I am the only guru on earth who has absolutely no difficulty saying out loud, my religion is Sanatana Dharma. Pretty much every guru I can think of alive today would not say that. They may have been born in India, born in the Brahmin caste, raised Hindu all their life. They may have themselves had even an authentic guru, etc., etc. They may even have studied, and once they come to the West, even then they will not say this. My religion, the religion that I practice, the religious tradition that I practice is Sanatana Dharma.
More, those very same Hindu leaders who at first challenged the wisdom of readopting our religion's true name are now themselves using the correct name with ever-increasing frequency, thus helping to make the term Sanatana Dharma a veritable household term. We have none other than Sri Dharma Pravartaka Acharya to thank for this gradual shift in terminology in the last 2 decades and for the reclaiming of our spiritual tradition's true and beautiful name, Sanatana Dharma. While the term Dharma has become an increasingly well-known word in the West in recent years, the actual philosophical concept of dharma has remained little understood among most spiritual circles. Dharma, or natural law, represents the deepest metaphysical and philosophical essence of the Vedic worldview and way of life. As Sri Acharyaji explains the concept of dharma in his book Sanatana Dharma, the Eternal Natural Way.
The principle of Dharma is by far the most ancient, important, universal, and powerful concept in existence today. Being at one time in history an ideology whose influence spanned much of the globe, Dharma represents the most ancient and prevalent philosophical concept in the entirety of world religious history. Dharma is a Weltanschauung, or a worldview like none other, because no other worldview has been as long-lasting, universal in application, and culturally all-encompassing.
Despite the clearly Vedic origins of dharma, however, the daily use of the term dharma had severely declined in recent years among most followers of Vedic spirituality and Hinduism. Indeed, the term dharma had eventually become so divorced from its Vedic origins that the term has now become more associated in popular mind with the later derivative religion of Buddhism than with the actual religion of its birth, which was Sanatana Dharma. All too many Westerners falsely associate dharma as being exclusive to Buddhism, even though Buddhism itself acknowledges that it adopted the concept of dharma from the much earlier Vedic religion. Sri Acharyaji understood that if the world was going to understand the profundity of the ancient Vedic path, it needed to first understand the meaning of dharma as the foundational teaching of the Vedic path. The Vedic religion, he understood, needed to boldly reclaim the use of the term dharma. Sri Acharyaji embarked on the task of both reclaiming dharma and educating the world on the deepest philosophical profundities of this fundamental Vedic concept. Sri Acharyaji's many writings include some of the most in-depth and intellectually rich explanations of the philosophical worldview of dharma from the original Vedic perspective available anywhere in any written language on earth today. In the last several decades, Sri Dharma Pravartaka Acharya has re-established the clear understanding that dharma is first and foremost a Vedic concept. Dharma represents the very essence of the Vedic path. More, Sri Acharyaji has insisted more than any other Vedic guru in the world today that dharma is a spiritual path that is welcoming of any sincere practitioners regardless of their ethnicity, language, national origin, or the religion that they were born into. Dharma is not the possession of any one nation. It is God's gift to all sentient beings. If we can understand the deepest meaning of dharma, Sri Acharyaji assures us all, then we can perfectly understand the totality of the Vedic worldview. A similar campaign that was designed to reinstantiate authentic Sanatana Dharma in the philosophical realm was dramatically initiated by Sri Acharyaji in 2005. It was in that year that his now world-famous Radical Universalism thesis was first published for the world to see. Originally released as a long 44-page philosophical essay and now rendered in an expanded book form, Acharyaji's innovative Radical Universalism, Does Hinduism Teach That All Religions Are the Same? Thesis went on to be read by over 1 million dharmis in its first year alone, and has now changed our understanding of Sanatana Dharma forever. In this important work, Sri Acharyaji explained in unassailable philosophical manner that Sanatana Dharma never taught the illogical claim that all religions are the same, or that all paths are one, and that this false proposition is thoroughly modern and Western notion that was superimposed upon traditional Sanatana Dharma for the last 2 centuries. Commenting upon Sri Acharyaji's work, Dr. David Frowley has stated the following. In his critique of radical universalism, Sri Acharyaji has boldly addressed this complex issue with depth, clarity, comprehensiveness, and sensitivity, and most importantly, with a profound rationality based upon the great principles of Vedanta. He shows how the Hindu tradition does not teach such a blind equation of all religions, but instead emphasizes an enlightened pluralism that not only allows for the existence of many paths, but insists that only a path as sharp as the edge of a razor can take us to the highest goal. There can be no compromise about the truth if one wants to realize the divine self within, which is the real aim of all religious spiritual striving. Sri Acharyaji restores this older and deeper approach of Hindu mind, which combines tolerance with truthfulness and insists upon philosophical clarity to one's views, regardless of whether others might agree or not. As was true with his campaign to revive the Vedic tradition's original name of Sanatana Dharma, at first there was modicum of resistance from less knowledgeable quarters. Today, however, Sri Acharyaji's radical universalism thesis is accepted by the vast majority of authentic and more knowledgeable Vedic and Hindu leaders as the philosophical norm in understanding the relationship of Sanatana Dharma in comparison to the other religions of our world. Sri Acharyaji's groundbreaking work on this issue has changed the world's understanding of the very nature of Sanatana Dharma. We have Sri Dharma Pravartaka Acharya's tireless effort to thank for this positive philosophical transformation. Sri Acharyaji was the very first Sanatana Dharma guru and scholar to write and publicly speak about the unfortunate divide that exists between the 2 separate Vedic communities of A. Indian Hindus and B. Western yoga practitioners. Sadly, Indian Hindus and Western yogis rarely communicate with each other, have too often found it challenging to relate to one another, have vastly different approaches to Vedic spirituality, and have remained 2 radically distinct communities. As he described this problem in his article Bridging the Gap, Uniting the Indian Hindu and Hidden Hindu Communities.
The gap between the 2 communities of Indian Hindus and Hidden Hindus, or Western Dharmis, in America and Europe needs to be bridged. Together, as one united Vedic community, Indians and Americans, Nepalis and British, Sri Lankans and Australians, let us endeavor to exhibit in our own personal lives and actions the spiritual qualities that form the very essence of Sanatana Dharma, and to work tirelessly together to preserve our common spiritual heritage for all future generations.
Sri Acharyaji has boldly proclaimed with an authoritative power that only someone of his spiritual caliber can, that Sanatana Dharma is not Indian, it is not American, it is not the possession of any nationality. Rather, Sanatana Dharma is God's gift to the entire world. Bridging the gap between these 2 separate communities with the eventual creation of one united and global community of followers of Sanatana Dharma tradition has been one of Sri Acharyaji's most important projects in the last several decades. In his writings, talks, and projects on this ongoing issue, Sri Acharyaji has done more to bring the Indian Hindu and Western yoga communities to a greater sense of unity than any other guru in the world today. Brahmanas are individuals who have the qualities necessary to be Vedic teachers, scholars, priests, philosophers, and guardians of Vedic culture. To be a Brahmana is one of the highest callings in human society. Despite this, however, very few in the present-day Vedic community would dispute the clear fact that Brahmana profession has severely degenerated over the last several centuries to being now only a mere shadow of what it once was. Over the last few decades, Sri Acharyaji has taken it upon himself to reintroduce the very highest of Brahminical standards to the Vedic world, as well as to reassert the foundational understanding of what constitutes an authentic Brahmana. Reintroducing the orthodox teaching that a Brahmana is known exclusively by his or her individual qualities and not by birth or caste, Acharyaji has waged a fearless campaign against the anti-Vedic modern social perversion known as the caste system. Indeed, he has waged this campaign against the unjust caste system, often at a great personal sacrifice to himself and his teaching mission. As Sri Acharyaji has explained,
being a Brahmana is not determined by one's birth, by one's parents, by one's name, or by one's so-called caste. Being a Brahmana is a calling that an individual person either has the inward ability to follow or not.
in addition, with the historical degeneration of the original Vedic Brahmana system, the awarding of the Brahmana thread to women was also eventually discarded many centuries ago. Sri Dharma Pravartaka Acharya has now actively revived the orthodox Vedic practice of awarding the Brahmana threads to qualified women. Beginning in 2008, Sri Acharyaji yet again made history as the very first qualified Vedic Acharya in over 2,000 years to award the Brahmana threads to Western women, having now invested several of his female disciples with Brahmana threads in orthodox Vedic ceremonies. As Acharyaji himself explains his bold actions,
I know that this historic precedent is only the beginning of the reclamation of an ancient and important Vedic tradition. My hope is that this represents only the first of many thousands of women who I will see awarded the sacred thread in my lifetime.
in these and multiple other ways, Sri Dharma Pravartaka Acharya has proven himself to be at the very cutting edge of authentic Vedic revival. Sri Acharyaji's courageous life has been a living testament to what it truly means to set Dharma in motion. If you wish to explore the life-enhancing teachings and practices of Vedic spirituality in a manner that is steeped in meaningful authenticity and rigorous philosophical depth, feel free to explore the teachings of Sri Dharma Pravartaka Acharya on dharmacentral.com. If you wish to extend your practical support to this extraordinary Vedic leader and teacher in his mission to share the benefit of Sanatana Dharma with the world, please visit dharmacentral.com.